Entitled woman orders black passenger to move. Pilot's furious reply stuns the cabin. You need to move to the back of the plane. First class is for people who actually belong here. Ma'am, I have every right to be in this seat. It's the one printed on my boarding pass. The tension in the first-class cabin was palpable. Every passenger had fallen silent, all eyes fixed on the confrontation unfolding in row 3. Patricia Whitmore, a woman in her early 60s with meticulously styled blonde hair and a designer scarf draped around her neck, stood in the aisle, her face flushed with indignation. Her manicured finger pointed accusingly at Dr. Marcus Johnson, a distinguished black man in his late 50s wearing a simple but well-tailored navy suit, who remained seated, his expression calm but firm. I don't care what your little paper says, Patricia hissed, her voice rising. There's obviously been a mistake. People like you don't fly first class on my flights. Flight attendant Sarah Chen approached, her professional smile strained. Is there a problem here? Yes, Patricia snapped. This person is in a first-class seat, and I know for a fact he doesn't belong here. Dr. Johnson took a deep breath, maintaining his composure. I'm a cardiologist returning from a medical conference in Atlanta. This is my assigned seat, 3C, Patricia scoffed. Anyone can print a fancy boarding pass and make up stories. I fly this route twice a month, and I've never seen him in first class before. The other passengers shifted uncomfortably. A few pulled out phones, recording the escalating scene. Sarah's eyes darted nervously between Patricia and Dr. Johnson. Ma'am, I've checked, and Dr. Johnson is indeed assigned to this seat, Sarah explained quietly. Then check again, Patricia demanded, her voice rising to a near shout. Or better yet, get the pilot. Let him sort this out. As if summoned by her words, a tall figure in a pilot's uniform appeared in the doorway separating the cockpit from the cabin. Captain Robert Bob Miller, a Vietnam veteran with silver hair and commanding presence, surveyed the scene with steely blue eyes. At 68, he was on his final route before retirement after 40 years of flying. What seems to be the problem? Captain Miller asked, his deep voice cutting through the tension. Patricia turned, relief washing over her face. Finally, someone with authority. This man is sitting in first class, and he clearly doesn't belong here. I'm a Platinum Elite member, and I know all the regulars. He needs to be moved to his proper place. The captain's expression hardened as he looked from Patricia to Dr. Johnson and back again. The entire cabin held its breath, waiting. Captain Miller's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, his voice low but crystal clear in the silent cabin. Ma'am, the only person who doesn't belong on this flight is the one causing a disturbance and harassing another passenger. Now, you have exactly 30 seconds to return to your seat, or I will have you removed from this aircraft. Your status doesn't give you the right to decide who belongs anywhere on my plane. The cabin erupted in shocked murmurs. Patricia's mouth opened and closed without sound, her face draining of color. But let's go back to how this all started. It was just 3 hours earlier when each of these lives intersected at Atlanta International Airport, setting in motion the events that would change them forever. Dr. Marcus Johnson rolled his suitcase through the bustling terminal, checking his watch. He had 40 minutes before boarding, just enough time to grab coffee and review his presentation notes one last time. The 4-day cardiology conference had been exhausting but fulfilling. His research on disparities in heart disease treatment across racial and socioeconomic lines had been well received, and several major hospitals had expressed interest in implementing his proposed protocols. Large black coffee, please, Marcus told the barista at the airport cafe. As he waited, his phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Maya. Safe flights, Dad. Can't wait to hear all about the conference. Love you. A small smile crossed his face as he texted back. Maya was finishing her first year of medical school, following in his footsteps but carving her own path. His chest swelled with pride thinking about her determination, especially after losing her mother to cancer 6 years ago. Life hadn't always been easy, but they had each other. Coffee in hand, Marcus found a seat near his gate and opened his laptop. He reviewed the slides from his presentation, making notes for improvements. So focused was he on his work that he almost missed the initial boarding call. Now boarding our Platinum Elite and first-class passengers for Flight 1372 to Chicago, the gate agent announced. Marcus gathered his belongings and joined the line, boarding pass in hand. He rarely treated himself to first class, but the conference had covered his flight, and he had been able to use his points to upgrade. After 4 days of networking and presenting, he was looking forward to a comfortable flight home. As he settled into seat 3C, Marcus noticed an older white man in an Air Force veteran's cap across the aisle. Captain Robert Miller was completing pre-flight checks, his experienced hands moving through the familiar routine with practiced efficiency. 40 years of flying commercial, preceded by his time as an Air Force pilot in Vietnam, had given him an unshakable confidence in the cockpit. His retirement was just days away. This Chicago route followed by one final flight to San Francisco, then he'd be hanging up his wings for good. Bob's mind drifted to his plans, fishing with his grandson, traveling with his wife Helen to all the places they'd put off visiting, maybe even writing that book about his experiences that she'd been encouraging him to start. A lifetime in the air, and soon he'd be permanently grounded by choice. The thought brought a bittersweet smile to his weathered face. "Captain, all passengers are boarded except for 2 connecting from a delayed flight," First Officer Michaels reported. "They should be here in the next 10 minutes. "Thank you, Jim," Bob nodded. "Let's start final preparations while we wait." "I've been flying this airline for 20 years. Captain Miller remained unmoved. "And in my 40 years with this airline, I've never allowed harassment on my aircraft, regardless of the passenger's status." "Your choices are simple. Return to your seat and remain there quietly for the duration of this flight, or be escorted off and placed on the no-fly list for this airline. Your 30 seconds started 10 seconds ago." Patricia's eyes darted around the cabin, searching for support, but found none. Even the faces she recognized, the regulars she considered her first-class compatriots, were turned away or staring at her with clear disapproval. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, but her voice had lost its commanding edge. Clutching her designer handbag to her chest, she returned to seat 4A, her face burning with humiliation. Captain Miller turned to Dr. Johnson. "My apologies for the disruption, sir. Please let our crew know if you need anything at all for the remainder of the flight." "Thank you, Captain," Marcus replied quietly. As Captain Miller returned to the cockpit, Sarah approached Patricia with a glass of water. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to inform you that your behavior has been reported. A representative will meet with you upon our arrival in Chicago." Patricia didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the window as the reality of her situation began to sink in. For the first time in decades, her status and money hadn't shielded her from consequences. In the cockpit, First Officer Michaels gave Bob a sidelong glance. "That was quite a speech, Captain," Bob sighed, settling back into his seat. 40 years of flying, and some things you still can't believe you're seeing in this day and age." He paused, then added, "My father owned a small grocery store in Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. When I was 12, he refused to enforce segregation in his store despite threats and losing business. He told me, 'Son, there comes a time when you have to decide what kind of man you're going to be.' I've tried to make the right decision every day since." "Well, that passenger certainly got the message," Jim replied with respect in his voice. The remainder of the flight passed in relative quiet. Patricia remained silently in her seat, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Dr. Johnson continued working on his laptop, occasionally exchanging pleasant conversation with the passenger beside him. The other first-class passengers whispered among themselves, the incident having broken the usual polite isolation of air travel. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Sarah made a final pass through the cabin. When she reached Dr. Johnson, she paused. "I'm sorry about what happened earlier," she said quietly. Marcus gave her a gentle smile. "It's not your fault, and it's not the first time something like this has happened, though usually it's more subtle." "It shouldn't happen at all," Sarah replied firmly. Then with a slight smile, she added, "Captain Miller doesn't usually get involved with cabin issues. He must have been watching from the cockpit." "Well, I appreciate his intervention," Marcus said. 40 years of experience brings wisdom." As the plane touched down in Chicago, Patricia remained in her seat, even as other first-class passengers began collecting their belongings. The familiar confidence that usually radiated from her was noticeably absent. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago, where the local time is 2:17 p.m. Please remain seated until we reach the gate. And remember, on this aircraft and in life, we rise higher when we lift each other up." As passengers prepared to deplane, an airline representative appeared at the front of the cabin. "Mrs. Patricia Whitmore," she called, "I need you to remain seated until all other passengers have deplaned." The reality of her situation washed over Patricia as she watched the other first-class passengers file past. Dr. Johnson gathered his briefcase and carry-on, not making eye contact with her as he passed. The sense of shame deepened when she recognized sympathy in the eyes of the teenage boy who had been sitting beside her. Once the cabin had emptied, the representative approached with a folder in hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Lisa Morgan from Passenger Services." I need to discuss the incident that occurred during this flight. Is this really necessary? Patricia asked, her voice smaller than before. It was a misunderstanding. According to multiple reports, including from our captain and crew, you verbally harassed another passenger based on his race, Lisa stated firmly. Our airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. As the gravity of the situation became clear, Patricia's defiance crumbled. I didn't mean. I wasn't thinking about his race. It's just that I know all the regulars, and he wasn't. Lisa held up a hand to stop her. Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Johnson is a cardiologist who regularly travels for medical conferences. He's been a member of our frequent flyer program for 15 years, longer than many of our staff. Your Platinum Elite status doesn't give you the authority to question another passenger's right to be in any section of the aircraft. Patricia fell silent as Lisa continued. Your status has been suspended pending review. You'll receive formal notification within 48 hours regarding further actions, which may include permanent revocation of your membership privileges. After the representative left, Patricia sat alone in the empty first-class cabin, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. Only when the cleaning crew arrived did she finally gather her belongings and exit the aircraft, her usual confident stride replaced by hesitant steps. Meanwhile, in the terminal, Captain Miller approached Dr. Johnson, who was waiting for his connecting flight to Milwaukee. Dr. Johnson, he called. Got a minute? Marcus looked up from his phone, surprised. Captain Miller, of course. The two men moved to a quieter area near the windows overlooking the tarmac. I wanted to apologize personally for what happened on the flight, Bob began. In 40 years of flying, I've seen a lot change, but clearly not enough. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate your intervention. Many would have found a way to smooth things over without addressing the real issue. My father taught me that silence in the face of wrong is its own kind of wrong, Bob replied. I'm retiring next week, and I've been reflecting on my career. The moments that matter aren't the perfect landings or the smooth flights. They're the times when you have to decide who you are. Retirement, huh? Marcus smiled. Any big plans? Bob chuckled. Fishing with my grandson, traveling with my wife to places we've put off seeing, maybe writing down some stories before I forget them all. He paused. How about you heading home? First to Milwaukee to see my daughter. She's in her first year of medical school there, Marcus answered, pride evident in his voice. Then back to Chicago, where I practice. As they continued talking, they discovered several connections. Both had lost spouses to cancer, both had grandchildren the same age, and both had served on hospital boards in Chicago. You know, Bob said after a while, my wife Helen is on the Community Outreach Committee for Chicago Memorial. They're always looking for medical professionals to speak to students in underprivileged schools about careers in healthcare. Given your work on healthcare disparities, it might be something of interest. Marcus's eyes lit up. Actually, that's exactly the kind of outreach I've been looking to get involved with. My late wife was a teacher in those very schools. They exchanged contact information, a connection formed from an unfortunate incident. Several gates away, Patricia Whitmore sat alone, scrolling through her phone. The video of the confrontation had already been uploaded to social media and was gaining traction. She watched herself on the small screen, heard her own words, and for the first time saw herself as others had seen her in that moment. A notification appeared, a message from her daughter. Mom, what's going on? Someone sent me a video of you on a plane. Please call me. Patricia closed her eyes. The reality of how far-reaching the consequences of her actions would be starting to dawn on her. Her social circle, her business associates, her family, all would see. The carefully cultivated image she had maintained for decades was crumbling with each share and comment. As she prepared to call her daughter, Patricia noticed an elderly black woman struggling with her luggage nearby. In the past, she would have ignored the scene. Today, something shifted. She put her phone away and approached the woman. Excuse me, Patricia said, her voice tentative. Would you like some help with that? The woman looked up, surprised. Why, yes, thank you. These old hands don't grip like they used to. As Patricia helped store the luggage in the overhead bin, the woman introduced herself as Alina James, a retired schoolteacher returning from visiting her son's family. They settled into adjacent seats, and for the first time in years, Patricia found herself truly listening to another person's story without calculation or judgment. 3 months later, Marcus Johnson stood before a group of high school students in one of Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods. He was there as part of an outreach program organized by Helen Miller, sharing his journey from a similar neighborhood to becoming a cardiologist. The path wasn't easy, he told the attentive teenagers. There were many times when people told me directly or indirectly that I didn't belong. But for every person who tried to put up barriers, there was someone else who held a door open. In the back of the classroom, Bob Miller stood with his wife Helen, watching the students' engaged faces. His retirement had been everything he'd hoped for: fishing, traveling, and giving back to the community. The friendship he had formed with Marcus had led to regular family dinners and mentoring opportunities that gave purpose to his post-airline life. After the presentation, as students crowded around Marcus with questions, the school principal approached Bob and Helen. "We have another guest who's volunteered with our literacy program," she said. "I thought you might like to meet her, given your connection to Dr. Johnson." Bob turned, surprised to see Patricia Whitmore standing uncertainly in the doorway. She looked different, her designer clothes replaced by a simple blouse and slacks, her expression open rather than guarded. Helen, unaware of the history between them, greeted Patricia warmly. "You're volunteering with the literacy program? That's wonderful. I've been trying to recruit more volunteers." Patricia nodded, her eyes moving between Helen and Bob. "It's been enlightening. I've learned more in the past 3 months than in the previous 30 years. Bob studied her for a moment before extending his hand. "People can change. I've seen it happen in the most unexpected ways." Patricia took his hand, gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for that day on the plane. Not for the humiliation, though I deserved it, but for the wake-up call. It's cost me some things I thought were important. My status, some fair-weather friends, but I'm finding there's a difference between being respected and being feared." Later, as the event wound down, Marcus approached, stopping short when he recognized Patricia. The moment hung between them, laden with the weight of their first encounter. Patricia spoke first. "Dr. Johnson, I owe you an apology that's 3 months overdue. There's no excuse for how I behaved that day. It was wrong, and I am deeply sorry." Marcus regarded her thoughtfully. "Apology accepted, Mrs. Whitmore, though I admit I'm surprised to see you here." "Life has a way of putting us exactly where we need to be," she replied. "Even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." As they talked, Patricia explained the journey she had undertaken since that fateful flight, the painful self-examination, the conversations with her daughter who had refused to excuse her behavior, the community service that had begun as penance but evolved into genuine commitment. "I lost my airline status and some business associates," Patricia admitted, "but I've gained perspective that was long overdue." The 4 of them, Marcus, Bob, Helen, and Patricia, ended up sharing dinner that evening. It wasn't without awkward moments, but there was also laughter and honest conversation. They discussed the video of the incident, which had gone viral and sparked discussions about privilege and accountability. "My grandson showed me how to read the comments," Bob chuckled. "Never knew my retirement would include becoming a minor internet celebrity." "My daughter told me I'd become a Karen," Patricia said with a self-deprecating smile. "Had to ask her what that meant. Not flattering." "My students use that video in discussions about standing up to discrimination," Marcus added. "Though I blur your face in those versions," he told Patricia. As the evening came to a close, they stood outside the restaurant, the Chicago skyline illuminated behind them. Bob looked at the 3 people before him, people who would have remained strangers if not for a moment of confrontation that could have gone very differently. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I spent 40 years flying planes, taking people to their destinations, but sometimes the most important journeys happen right where we are, in the choices we make every day." Helen squeezed his hand. "My philosopher husband, this is why I encouraged you to write that book." Marcus smiled. "I'd read that book." "Me too," Patricia added quietly. "Some lessons take a lifetime to learn, but better late than never." As they parted ways, each heading in different directions into the Chicago night, the connection between them remained, a reminder that transformation could begin in the most unexpected moments, even at 30,000 feet. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.